the fact that great leaders are persuadable. They can change their mind after they receive new information. And I think this goes along the same vein as the growth mindset. They receive new information, they change their course of action. It's seen as a weakness. Why do we perceive people that change their mind as being weak? Like, didn't they know? Aren't they firm on what they believe? Well, no, they have new information. They're going to make a better decision based on that better information. And we need to be, as a society, be more willing to embrace that. But I think, there's a lot of people with a fixed mindset in a lot of areas, and we are unforgiving to ourselves and to those around us.
That's a piece of my conversation with Mark Stovel. My name is Ben Charland. This is What on Earth is Going On, your weekly podcast for a world in flux. Now, on this week's episode, we're talking about a book, Mindset, by Carol Dweck. It's important for you to know that neither Mark nor myself are experts in any way in the subject matter of this book or about the book itself. We've simply read it, we've done a lot of thinking about it, and as you're going to hear in a minute, we've had a conversation about it. Now, before we get to that, I wanted to, as always, ask you for a favor. Please spread the word about this show. You can give it a rating on iTunes. You can go to the website, wogoshow.com. That's WOEGO show.com for links to social media and for all previous episodes in podcast form. If you have any questions or suggestions or feedback for the show, please reach out. wogoshow@gmail.com is my email. And of course, on social media, the handle is @wogoshow. And now here's my conversation with Mark.
All right. Mark Stovel, welcome to the program.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate the invitation.
So today we're going to talk about this book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Carol S. Dweck. She's a scholar who wrote this book back in 2006. And her main point seems to be this division between two different mindsets. One is a growth mindset and one is a fixed mindset. I'm just kind of giving the thesis for this book to start. And I'm going to start, before I ask you the first question, what on earth is going on, I'm just going to pull one really quick story from the book to give people a sense of the power of thinking and the power of belief that's inherent in here, and how this book can be quite helpful, not only in understanding the world around us, but also in understanding how each individual can maximize their abilities, I suppose. So the story is that there's a student going to university, you might remember this from the book, who shows up late to class. He comes in late, he misses what has been going on and sees on the board 2 questions. He assumes that those questions are his homework because at the end of the class the teacher says, "Okay, come back tomorrow come back next week, bring back your assignments and we'll talk about it." So he assumes that's his homework. He goes back and for 4 days, hammers out his responses to these questions. Is just killing himself to figure it out because they're really, really hard. And he's a maths major at a major American university. He comes back the next week or whenever the next class is, only to discover that those 2 questions were not questions for homework. They are problems in mathematics that have never been solved.
Yeah.
He provides his answers anyways and discovers that he was right. He solved 2 unsolvable mathematical problems that up to that point were impossible for the greatest math geniuses in the world. He was just a student, not necessarily a genius, although he may have been. The point is that he had a mindset at that time, in that moment of, I have to do this. I can do this. It's my homework. Everybody else is going to do it. Maybe he didn't talk to anybody else, luckily, about his homework and just got ahead and did it and achieved something, not because necessarily he was a genius, although that may have been true, but because of his mindset. And I think that's maybe the core of what this book is getting to, the power of belief and the fact that if he didn't have that mindset, he probably wouldn't have attempted those problems, or if he did attempt them, he'd attempt them with a very different perspective, a very different attitude. So that's the way that I want to frame our discussion today. And to you goes the first question, as we always ask on this show. According to this book, Mindset by Carol S. Dweck, what on earth is going on?
That's a great question. I think according to this book, there is a shift, I think, in the general mindset of society towards this growth mindset. And I think as we talk about the examples and the way that we can change our mindset and what puts us into these various mindsets, we'll start to understand how this shift is occurring. I'm excited about it. I think it's a good thing for all of us individually and generally speaking.
So what was the key principle from the book that you pulled out for yourself? And you're a father as well. For being a father, for your work, what was the key principle that you pulled from the book?
It's in your mind. It's the story you related emphasizes the fact that these barriers are put up, and those barriers prevent us from accomplishing what we want, from having a good relationship, from helping our children learn and grow, from succeeding in business, from getting promoted at work. These psychological barriers are the only things that are holding us back.
So what are the barriers that you're talking about? I guess of the fixed mindset. What are those barriers?
They're ideas, whether it's through nature or nurture. She doesn't really get into that, the author. She kind of leaves it open to the fact that, are these things inherent? We don't know. Are they taught to us by our parents, by our friends, by the media? Probably. But how do we get past these barriers to grow? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the fixed mindset is described, limiting yourself. What you see is what you get. Mm-hmm. I'm only as good as what I am right now. There's no way to progress. There's no way to be better. Mm-hmm. There's no clear definition provided in the book. She just lists all these various ideas.
Right. I think that what I took it is that there's this fixed mindset and then there's the growth mindset. In the fixed mindset, you believe that your abilities, whether it's intelligence or passion or drive, are inherent in you, and there's nothing you can do to change those things. That's what you believe. The growth mindset is an embracing of failure because you believe that you can change, and it's treating the brain as a muscle just like the body, and that if you work hard enough, you can be, not anything you can be. I think Dweck is very careful not to tell people, hey, go and try your best and you can be anything you want. It's more about the only way to be better is to grow. And the only way to grow is to believe that you can grow. And it sounds really, really simple. It almost sounds obvious, but I think what is clear is that a lot of people have the mindset of, I am what I am, and I need to preserve my image of being good at certain things. So the fixed mindset is not about necessarily being fixed in the sense that I'm stupid or incapable. It's rather being fixed in the sense that I'm already smart. I'm already capable. I don't need to improve. I just need to protect my image of being capable. And that when we spend all of our time protecting our reputation, then we will not solve those two math problems on the chalkboard. We're rather going to do the work that we can do and make everyone else think that we're still smart like they always thought we were, rather than embracing failure and doing what great people like Albert Einstein said, that the only reason I'm a success is because of my many failures, and I've failed far more often than I've succeeded. And I think that another principle here is effort. That effort, and this gets into the talk about praise, which we can talk about later, but that effort is what should be praised rather than talent.
Yeah.
As a father, what do you make of all of this? Do you think that has it changed your perspective of parenting or reinforced the things that you're already doing?
A little bit of both. My wife, early on in our marriage, wanted to ensure that we spoke to our daughters in a very affirming way to their abilities and talents, meaning we acknowledged them, but didn't identify them as an artist or as a soccer player, that those were abilities that they have developed and that they can continue to develop them. As well as early on with our first daughter, my wife said, I do not want to call her a good girl for finishing her food, for picking up her toys. Her value as a person, as a good person, is inherent, is intrinsic, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
She's a good person regardless.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't need to have, her tasks being the determination of her value.
Mm-hmm.
So we and still to this day, when they do something well, we say good job. You put forth a good effort.
Yeah.
Now, thinking with this mindset now, I've refined the way that I praise my daughters. My oldest daughter just learned how to ride a bicycle, and I remember I was listening to this book shortly before I saw her for the first time after she had accomplished this task, and I said, "Great job! You worked so hard at learning how to ride your bike." And she did. It was a little bit of a struggle for her. Maybe she didn't learn it as fast as some kids, but she really was determined to succeed, and she did. And so I grabbed her by the shoulder and gave her a big hug and said, "I know how much effort you've put into this,
Right.
and you've succeeded."
Right.
So I want to build that correlation between effort and success,
Right.
because 2 or 3 years ago when she started riding her bike, which it's a long time for learning how to ride a bike, she was very timid and very worried about falling down, and that was the hesitation. She didn't want to fail. She didn't want to get hurt. And the road was a little bit longer, but she succeeded, and we applauded that.
So in light of this book, again, as a father, how do you get your kids, or how do you yourself embrace failure as something that is worthy for learning? That is actually the only real ingredient for learning that's critical over any other. How do you do that when failure can be so scary for especially a kid?
I don't know if I use the term failure at this point, but when our oldest daughter, she's quick to throw up her arms and say, "This is too hard. I don't want to do this anymore."
Yeah.
And our response is, "You just need to practice more." I've never said, "Well, failure is part of it," but I always go back to, "You need to practice more. You need to practice more." And she's like, "Okay." And there's been many times where she'll not get the right color for her. She's into color mixing. She might not get what she wants, and she just pushes the paper off the table. And I said, "Hey, you need to practice a little bit more." And she'll kind of look at me grimly and then pull her paper back and continue to do it.
Right.
Her teacher shared a story with us about learning counting by fives, and they do that with jump rope because that's how they do it. They just do 5, 10, 15, 20, and they do their mathematics jumping rope. And she couldn't get it, and she was distressed. And the teacher said, "Ellie, you get one more shot before we move on." And she got this look of determination in her eyes. She stepped up and she jumped 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, all the way to 100, and she nailed it. And she was so excited for getting there. And that made me extremely excited. Not that she was successful, but that she had gone from failing to succeeding, and she recognized that it took a little bit of determination and grit to get there.
Well, and I think one of the things that the book disabuses us of is the feeling that we just need to tell children or tell ourselves that you're smart. You're already capable. So, for example, if someone is struggling with their homework or struggling to get an assignment done at work or something like that, and we tell them, "Don't worry, you're really smart. You've got this. You can take it on. You have it within you to accomplish the task." That's actually the fixed mindset, and it might be helpful, but it's only helpful in the short term. The growth mindset that Dweck is talking about, I think, is saying to that same person, "You don't have it within you right now to achieve this task. You don't actually have the ability. The only way to get the ability to do your homework is to work at it, is to get the practice and be patient with yourself, and eventually you will get there." Now, obviously, you might need to rephrase that in a gentler, kinder way, but that's the principle I think that Dweck is getting at, is that you're right. You are not currently capable. She gives examples of people in sports who complain that they may not have won the championship, or that they may not make the team. They might not make the cut. And that person, what should they be told by their parents? Should they be told, number one, you deserved to get on the team and someone was unfair to you, so blame somebody else. Or you were really tired that day, and if only you'd gotten a better night's sleep, then you'd be fine. Or should it be that the other people on the team aren't looking out for you because they are jealous of you and your success in other areas or something like that? Again, blaming it on other people.
Yeah. Or
should it be, yeah, well, you just didn't put in the effort that day and you got to try harder next time? That's closer to the truth. But the truth is really, no, you did not deserve to get on the team. You did not deserve to win. It sounds cutthroat, but deserving success, earning success, comes from growth. It's a really simple concept, but it seems to me that when I was reading this book, that most people are actually not in that mindset. Most people are in preservation mode, defending their reputation, protecting their image, and making sure they can just get by far enough without having to try too hard or to try to get out of their comfort zone, which is another key concept.
Yeah.
Getting out of your comfort zone. And I guess we have to face the fact that to grow requires not only failure, but sometimes embarrassing failure. And one quote from the book from Dweck is that she says that the growth mindset is, quote, "This is hard, this is fun." That correlation there is what's necessary. That what is hard is not just what's necessary, but what's fun. I enjoy doing things that are hard. Someone like me, and maybe someone like you too, I'm older now. It's harder for me to embrace that when I've spent most of my life looking for the easier path, right? Maybe this is just me, but I think that maybe changing the mindset can be difficult. Did you feel like you saw where you might be in a fixed mindset when you were reading this?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I feel like I have a fixed mindset in certain areas of my life and a growth mindset in other areas.
Right.
And Dweck, illustrates that you can have both mindsets, and you can change them, and you can actually be put into them with certain triggers. Mm-hmm. For me, a fixed mindset might be, my ability to. I'm struggling with this one. You'll have to edit this part out.
I will.
That's a good question.
Yeah, what's an example of your fixed mindset?
So I recently moved to a farm, and I'm totally uneducated when it comes to the farm life, being born and raised in the city. And we just discovered we have a beehive on our property, and I'm scared to death to do anything with them.
Right.
Because I might kill them.
Right. And you might hurt yourself, too, if you're dealing with bees.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's, when you enter a new environment like that, because everyone around me knows how to birth a calf and take care of chickens, and this is all new to me, and I'm kind of hesitant to try it, especially when there's a life involved. And I've been told that when you have livestock, you have dead stock, because death is just the way of life on a farm.
Right.
So I need to keep that in mind and consider that, yes, I'm learning with these bees and it might kill them, but the learning process, the failure process is for the better, for the good of hopefully the hundreds of other hives that I'll take care of in the coming years.
Right. That's actually a great example of how you at a later stage in your life need to adjust the way you do things and the way. And do you think that a key part of that is not just the work you do, but the beliefs you have about the work you do? That your belief about livestock being dead stock, for example. Is belief important there?
I think so. Like, I've always believed that treating animals well is extremely important.
Yeah.
And, as I watch my neighbor who has, a half dozen horses and a few cows, and the way that he treats them, I'm like, oh, you're being a little rough there, but he knows how to handle these animals, and they're extremely happy and well taken care of. Maybe the inexperience has created this belief that I can't do this. I don't know. And
when we're dealing with this example, to what extent is it important to really understand the principles of, say, farm life? This is something that goes back to what Dweck talks about with education. So what she says is that too much education is focused on memorization. Obviously, we've been talking about this for a long time, but also just knowing the surface of something so that you can answer the question, rather than understanding it deeply. understanding the reason for something, understanding the core principle or concept behind an idea, whether it's astrophysics or quadratic equations or the grand sweeps of history. So I'm not just memorizing dates. I'm understanding why those dates happened and how they fit together and what the greater forces are at play. And if I understand those, then I can actually rationalize how to get to a greater, the answer, even if it's a simple, shallow answer, as opposed to just memorizing things by rote. And understanding, as opposed to memorization, is maybe growth versus fixed. So for you, how important is that deeper understanding for what you're talking about?
It's wildly important, and I think learning something superficially is good to get the answer and move on. But if you want it to make an impact in your life and build upon it and use it as a tool, because you can't build on something superficially, it's impossible. It's extremely important. And what I find with myself is, so going back to the farm, I'm currently building a chicken coop. I knew jack squat about chickens. And so when I went to design a chicken coop, I needed to learn some foundational stuff when it came to taking care of chickens, especially in Ontario, where it can get really cold and wet.
Right.
And so I learned these foundational things, and I built this coop, and people have seen this coop and they said, where did you get your design for this? And I said, I just kind of made it up because I found some foundational stuff, non-superficial things, and was able to build upon it. I like to customize, like to make things my own way, and without understanding the reason why, I couldn't get to where I was comfortable with building what I think is a comfortable, dependable coop for our chickens.
Well, and also understanding why seems to maintain someone in their work in the long term. So if I understand really why I'm doing something, then I'll probably keep doing it for 5 years as opposed to just 5 days and then I just give up. Or learning something. If I understand the key principles, then I can learn any detail and fit it back into the core concept, and then maybe even discard that detail so that I can fit more into my brain, as opposed to, again, just learning the outside of something. But the only way to learn the core principle of something is to know that core principle might change, to know that this key idea, whether it's in history or physics or chemistry or farming, that this key idea might actually shift, and that your perspective of farming, for example, in 5 years might change, and you might need to be open to that, I guess, when the time comes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I've always been told, don't let, when I went to post-secondary, my dad always said, don't let your education get in the way of your learning. And you can't retain everything that you learn at school, especially a 4-year undergrad degree, but you can take away, ways to approach problems, ways to deal with people, and hopefully apply that in your field.
Like you're talking about critical thinking.
Exactly. As myself as an accountant, I approach questions differently than my sister, who's an engineer.
Right.
And I think that's the foundational learning that education that takes place.
So that's actually an interesting point, that you're an accountant. So it seems, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that being an accountant in your day-to-day life, most things have they may not be straightforward answers, but they're answers that are they're either right or they're wrong to a question. Rarely is there a gray area, although I'm sure when it comes to taxation or whatever, there can be gray areas that you have to deal with. And that might be some interesting parts of your work. But if everything is so binary, so right or wrong, and sometimes so basic, how do you maintain a growth mindset in that field? How do you keep it growing, both in your business, but also in your day-to-day grind of work?
When I advise my clients about their next step, they always come to me and say, well, here are the two variables. What should I do? I said, depends. I always say it depends, because where do you want to be 5 years from now? Because you're not going to get there unless you put yourself on the track now. And so, yes, things are black and white, but every single situation is unique. Right. So the rules are applied the same, but in what timeline or to what extent they're applied depend on the person's situation. So yes, 2 + 2 = 4, but do you want that 2 to be next month or next year? What are your plans for growth? What kind of leverage can you make available to grow? And so there's variables that are always in play,
Right.
regardless of the fixed rules.
So in a sense, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly.
So how do you apply that for your own work, for your career? How do you keep growing in that way?
Well, accountancy is an industry that's has been impacted significantly recently, and will be impacted much more, so much more in the coming years. I run an online accounting firm, and I work basically from anywhere I want. And accounting has always been ahead of the curve in terms of being a remote occupation. There's lots of accountants that work from the Caymans or work offshore, and they can service clients in Canada or the United States.
Right.
And that's going to continue to change. And with the introduction of artificial intelligence, our work, crunching the debits and credits is going to go away, and the machines are going to start doing that.
Right.
So for me, there's lots of bookkeepers, there's lots of accountants that like to do the debits and credits because it's superficially very easy.
Yeah.
However, our jobs are going to be replaced by bots. And so for me, I'm like, I don't want to be obsolete in 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
So I'm transitioning. First of all, I'm trying to use the latest technology, latest apps to be able to service my clients from afar and make their life easy. But I'm also trying to transition into a consultant role, because the bank reconciliations are going to be done by a robot later on. But I want to be able to sit down with my clients and help them build a roadmap to where they want to be. This became a pitch for my accounting services, but that's truly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people visualize their business. What's their end game. And typically the end game is to sell your business in X number of years, and that just depends on what stage you are at in your business maturity cycle. But that's what I'm trying to do.
You mentioned AI and the coming automation of all kinds of sectors, one of them being obviously accounting. But what's so interesting about this is that human beings, at least as we can foresee, are going to be in the loop with AI for years to come. That human beings need to be part of the oversight of artificial intelligence. They need to be part of the design, of the management of the systems that we're building. Even if machine learning becomes a critical feature, say in accounting, where the machine creates new machines, which create new machines, and each iteration is smarter, better, faster than the previous one, we still need humans to build in certain things like ethics into the programming and the core concepts of what are we trying to achieve with this, rather than just pursuing an aim that may be long obsolete. And the only way to do that, it seems to me, would be for the humans to have a growth mindset, to be growing along with the machines that they're building, with these AI systems that are running, say, an accounting firm. And they may even be running the interaction with a client. It seems to me that a lot of people's interaction now, whether it's in a chat with a service provider, whether it's with your phone company or whatever, you can actually chat with what you think is a person on the internet to solve your problems, but it could in fact be a bot, a computer. That this customer service interaction may be automated as well, but still we need people who are essentially either pulling the levers in the background on the greater scale or making sure that the levers are pulled in the right way. Is that how you see yourself growing in your business in the future? Or is it more of a person-to-person interaction that you're trying to preserve as a human component in the field?
I instruct my clients to use as much technology as possible. Technology never sleeps. It never goes on vacation. It's never sick. But there are some things that you cannot turn over to a bot, and that's the decision making, the ethical decision making, the consideration for your employees. Because at the end of the day, you can turn the dial to lowest cost, and every decision that's made can be made with that in mind. But that's hugely detrimental to the success of the human capital in your business. Because you can move your factory to a cheap part of town, but if there's no transit that gets your employees there, if there's, exponential cost to park there, you're going to lose good quality employees that you've spent time training.
Right.
Some people might say, well, you'll find new employees, but if you're in the middle of nowhere because it's the cheapest, and you're not Home Depot or Walmart, you're not going to attract people to move there to work for you. So there's always, when I went through my chartered accountant training, there was always the emphasis to look at the quantitative and the qualitative. And right now I think the AI does the quantitative really well and will excel at that.
Yeah.
But the quantitative, there's going to be a lot of work. Sorry, the qualitative, thank you. There's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done. I think AI will get there.
So can you explain the difference between quantitative and qualitative?
So let's take the example of moving your building or your office to a new location. The quantitative, you're going to pay X number of dollars less per month, but then qualitative is you're going to impact your employees, you're going to increase their travel time, you're going to do all these things that are going to, you can't put a number, a dollar value to it, but it's going to affect the quality of how your business runs.
Right.
And so in all business decisions, there's the quantitative and the qualitative approach or assessment that has to be done.
I want to return to a principle in the book so Dweck doesn't actually mention the philosopher Socrates, but she mentions one of the key concepts that Socrates espoused, which is, I know nothing.
Yeah.
I am ignorant. And therefore, every question that I ask is based on this ignorance. And it was a humble approach, but also the only true correct approach to philosophy, to assume that I don't know the answer and therefore to try to seek it out through evidence and through reasoning, through both empirical and rational discovery. So the sense that I am ignorant, that I don't know, is again one of the features of the growth mindset. So to go back to what you're talking about, whether it's in accounting or also when you've moved to a farm, where does the belief that I am actually ignorant and that being a positive thing, where does that come in for you?
Apart from creating a little anxiety, it's a motivation to keep learning, right? On a farm, I had to learn very quickly how to use a tractor to plow the laneway so I could get out of off the property when it when it snows, 2 feet. So this knowing that I don't know everything, there can be a lot of anxiety around it. But I always go back to, well, other people are doing it and they're no smarter than I am. So I just need to keep pushing myself to learn. And in my profession, there's educational requirements. So I need to continue to educate and refine my skill.
Right.
And I enjoy that because it's, when I'm busy, I don't enjoy it because I don't have time for it. But it's nice to be able to sit back and learn something new, and it's forced. You have to do it. So it creates anxiety, but it also gives purpose to continue to stay sharp, not become obsolete, and to use better tools to service my clients. Because it's what I gained from Dweck's book was that the fixed mindset is extremely comfortable. And when you have a growth mindset, you do have that anxiety and you're very uncomfortable. You talked about your being in the comfort zone, but it's extremely comfortable to be, sure of where you are and your skills. Because you can, you avoid situations where you may look silly because you might fail, and you stay in that comfort zone and there's no, basically there's no reason to leave and you're just comfortable.
And to not only embrace but to enjoy being uncomfortable, which is hard. I mean, I say this as if it's obvious and it's so easy for me, but it's hard. It's hard. I mean, there are some people out there who I guess maybe they're naturally good at seeking out a situation that makes them uncomfortable. Those kind of people who, when they're faced with a weird kind of cheese they've never smelled or tasted before, they just eat it. They just try it. And if it's gross, then it's gross, and they move on to the next thing. And maybe it's gross first and then a little bit less gross, and all of a sudden they're a big fan of this crazy foot cheese. And there are people out there who seem to embrace this more. And I think Dweck would argue that they're not naturally better or worse. You just have to practice a different mindset. I don't know if that's true. I think some people are more natural risk takers than others. But that doesn't mean that those of us who maybe are more afraid of risk can't change our belief system and embrace it more regularly. And I think there was something interesting you said a moment ago, which is that other people aren't any smarter than me. So why can't I do what they're doing or become proficient? But what's important, I think, too, is that they may not be naturally smarter than you or dumber than you, but there are parts of themselves that are more practiced, sometimes far more practiced.
Yeah.
So when I'm learning from, whether it's a coach in school or a professor in a university or someone in the workplace who is more advanced than I am, I have to assume that they may have years of training and exercise that I don't have. And exercise being the key word, that just like an athlete needing to exercise muscles, I can't be a bodybuilder tomorrow. There's no chance. I may not be able to be a bodybuilder in my life, but if I had started at a certain point, maybe I could. Maybe I can now. I don't know. But what would it require for me to do that? An enormous amount of effort, because my muscles would need to grow.
Yeah.
And the brain is the same way. And it may be an obvious principle for people, but even if it's obvious, we may still be stuck in the mindset that I am naturally one way or the other. And someone who's really good at, whether it's shoveling your front walk on the farm, or for example, in our conversation, accounting. I don't know accounting at all. You have muscles in your brain, essentially, that are very well exercised. That doesn't mean that I can't exercise the same ones and get to where you are, but it requires effort, it requires time, and it's going to require me to get out of my comfort zone and practice and fail and practice some more. And the sense that I can grow in the same way that my body can, I think is not only important, but if we don't learn that lesson, we may be setting ourselves up for true failure later on.
And unhappiness.
Yeah.
When Dweck made the comment that you can increase your intelligence in her book, I know that, I guess, but when I heard that, I was like, yeah, you can. And it was kind of like an aha moment.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, because I guess up to that point, I had the fixed mindset that I have reached a certain level of intelligence, and I kind of just play there.
Yeah.
But we got to look at our definition of intelligence to make sure that we're speaking about the right thing. But yeah, we can grow our intelligence, we can grow our ability, and like you said, with a lot of effort. Dweck speaks a lot about Malcolm Gladwell and his writings, and his book Outliers, where they specifically talk about that these great moguls in their areas, Wayne Gretzky, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they didn't get there because they're geniuses. They're very intelligent, but their effort was exponential. They had opportunities. They were put in situations where they were able to just learn, fail, learn, grow, and that's why they got to where they are or were. And that's a interesting idea, because we look at these guys and we're told that they're just untouchable, that we can't get to where they are because they just have a higher level of intelligence or a higher level of ability. But no, there's a lot of effort that goes into getting to be like that.
Well, you mentioned Malcolm Gladwell. One thing that he says that Dweck quotes in the book, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that we human beings, for whatever reason, probably somewhere in our evolution, prize natural endowment over earned or gained ability.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, we've come to believe deep down inside that someone is naturally good at something, and we prize that over someone who's had to earn it. There's something about our culture and our pop culture and the movies and television shows and books that we read. There's something in there that says that someone is destined for success. Someone was always meant to be there, and what matters is whether or not they are able to achieve their potential, as we say.
Yeah.
Achieve their human potential, as opposed to perhaps the truer belief, which is that People who earn the place in our society of being heralded are ones who pursued their passion, failed and tried and failed and tried and failed and tried again until they got there. And really, there is no getting there. There is no destination. There's the constant improving and moving. I mean, Bill Gates is a great example of this. Someone who achieved great things in computer technology, in business, but has never ceased to learn, to try to learn, but also to use what he has learned to improve himself and therefore improve the world. At no point is Bill Gates ever going to say, yeah, I'm done. I'm just going to enjoy my fortune and sit on a beach for the rest of my life. That's not who he is, because, I mean, maybe I'm being too pedantic to say that I think he has a growth mindset. But that's a great example of someone who moves from thing to thing, embracing failure, embracing maybe even discomfort.
Well, Dweck, she talks about, naturally talented athletes, and there's nothing stopping them from getting to the top. But you can tell when there's an athlete that kind of rides on their laurels, I guess, on their talents.
Yeah.
They only stay at the top for a short period of time.
Right.
But the true hardworking athletes, they'll get to the top and they'll stay there.
Mm-hmm.
She references Michael Jordan a whole bunch, and I grew up watching him, so I enjoyed listening about him. But when he returned to basketball after retiring, they lost in the playoffs the first year that he retired, and he said, listen, you me, that we'll win next year. And then they won the next 3 years, the national championship. And that's to me, that's a true growth mindset, to be knocked down, dust yourself off, and then get back up and push harder and win and succeed.
Right. There's something that Dweck references in the book, which is the parable of the tortoise and the hare, right? The old one about there was a race, there's the fast hare that can blow anybody in a race, but then there's the tortoise who is just extremely slow, but the tortoise wins because the hare takes a nap. And the tortoise is the one that's just patient and keeps on going until they finally get to the end of the race. Now, this parable sounds like what we're talking about. The tortoise wins in the end. But actually, the parable is incorrect, according to Dweck. Because what it's saying is that the hare is naturally the one who should win the race. In fact, if only the hare were a better hare, then the hare would win. It's supposed to. And the turtle is supposed to lose, but the turtle only wins because it perseveres, but really because the hare screwed up. The hare messed up in the race. What Dweck is saying is that the hare didn't mess up, the turtle didn't mess up. It's all about effort. The hare can become the turtle, right? And actually there are many people in the world who, another principle of the book is you might go to an old high school graduation and meet people there, some of whom, at the time you went to high school with them, were brilliant, had everything going for them, all the potential in the world, and they were going to be somebody great. And they didn't. And they didn't because they needed to preserve their image, their reputation, their sense that they were good and smart, and they stopped growing. They stopped growing at 18 years old or 21 years old or even 14 years old. They stopped growing. And those who we didn't maybe expect so much of went on to go and achieve great things because they didn't have that holding them back. There was almost a growth and a fixed mindset imposed upon them by their very education in social circles in high school. This is actually from an interview that Dweck did after the book, where she talks about going back to a high school graduation and seeing this literally in people who were expected to be everything. And that expectation created problems going forward. How do you, again, going back to accounting, to living on a farm, and to being a father, how do you make sure to manage expectation in such a way that you don't create someone who doesn't want to change anymore and thinks that they deserve, that they're entitled to success?
Right. I continually remind myself that my daughters learn more from what I do than what I say. And I think as parents, we need to set the example and try new things, learn new skills, fail, be okay with it, right? The fact that my wife tries, different dishes at meals, or, I build things at home and some of them don't work out, some of them fail. is really good learning for our daughters, and continually use the right language to encourage them to fail and say it's okay. I've they're extremely talented. They're extremely gifted. My daughters in different areas, and I have to constantly remind myself that only comes because of their hard work and their effort. When my daughter produces a nice drawing, I make sure that I emphasize her ability to learn how to grip her crayon or pencil correctly, her ability to, match colors, because she's done it for years, and she's, found out what colors make, what group of colors make certain colors. And those are the things that I emphasize when I applaud them. But yeah, no, living the growth lifestyle is the best way, in my opinion, to encourage the mindset and use the proper language.
And avoid the expectation that I'm supposed to be something, or
Right.
that I'm supposed to achieve success, or I'm doomed to failure. That maybe I've been told I'm stupid so many times that I come to believe it deep down inside, even if there's really no evidence for that, right?
Exactly. Dweck references research where simply by checking a box for your gender or your ethnicity puts you into a mindset, a negative, stereotypical mindset based on that, that gender. She specifically speaks about the idea that women can't compete as well as men in the math and sciences, which is absurd. But by simply checking a box that you're female, you're subconsciously put in that mindset that you'll underperform.
Yeah.
And the same, she speaks about people checking the box to being African American. All of a sudden they are less intelligent than Caucasian or white people. And that can be detrimental. And, there's nothing, the only thing that changed was that barrier that we put in our mind by acknowledging that stereotype.
Dweck talks in her book about triggers for the fixed mindset. And I guess we should be clear about this, that she is very clear that nobody is purely fixed and nobody is purely growth, that we're all mixtures of each of them. And towards the end of the book, she actually talks about, almost as a psychologist, to name your fixed mindset in yourself. Give that person a name. Let that person exist as an independent entity,
yeah.
a persona within you. And then notice when they come up. Notice when they raise their hand. Notice when they prevent you from doing something. I mean, I remember years ago in improv, in theater, we called it the editor. In creative writing, the person who is within you who is telling you, no, that's no good, nobody's going to like that, don't bother, don't write it. Rather than the true creative impulse, which is to just go for it and fail and see what happens. Many people have said, in writing, for example, your first draft will always suck because it's your first attempt.
Yeah.
I think it was Hemingway who actually said that when you never really, you're trying to get it. You're trying to beat someone. When he was writing, he was trying to copy other people and beat them at their own game. But he didn't always succeed. And in fact, it was the feeling of, I didn't quite get it. I need to try it again to get it. And Hemingway is a terrible example to give to other writers as a person to grow from, because he was so idiosyncratic. He was so different from anybody else, and also, I think, iconoclastic. He was just trying to be different for the sake of being different and to even bring other people down. But what was interesting about what he was doing in his writing was to match other people, maybe in a really macho sort of way, but to beat them, to make his own art grow. And to get out of his comfort zone. Again, to go to that principle of getting out of your comfort zone is difficult, but the only way to really succeed truly at anything. I think I went on like 4 different tangents in that little speech there, but I think what we're getting from the book is that challenging yourself beyond what you expected to be challenged by is the only real way to grow.
Absolutely. What I love about this whole fixed growth mindset idea is that it's so apparent in startup culture. And I love how the startup culture is growing, in that, everybody has a smartphone, everyone kind of understands what a startup is, but startups are leading the way when it comes to succeeding through failure. And, my hope is that it permeates the other aspects of life, politics, business, relationships, that these people, they release a product, it's looked down on, they take the feedback back, they change, and they go to market again. And it's a series of trial and error to get something that people want. Doing that in politics is hugely detrimental, because you almost, sometimes you only get one shot at being a political leader. But as society, we need to be a little more forgiving, I think, for letting people experiment, because people continue to do the same thing because it's safe. And as a group of people, we are unforgiving with failure, with ourselves and with other people. But the startup culture, like a company is never crucified for releasing a bad product. It just won't get adopted, right?
Yeah.
And then they go back and change, and then they release it again. But companies are crucified for social blunders, which I think is appropriate for, certain issues. Companies take stances on certain issues, and people have the right to not patronize that company for social political stances that
ethical,
they take.
yeah.
Ethical, but no company's ever crucified in the media because of what they produce. And I think we need to take that approach with other parts of life. Business, same way. CEOs, they almost have to prove themselves in the first 2 or 3 quarters, otherwise they might get turfed. But the great business minds of the past century are long-term thinkers, and they experiment. They go out on a limb and say, this will be a potential issue, but I think this is the only way that we can move forward. There's a book by Al Pittampalli called Persuadable. I love it, absolutely love it, and it speaks to the fact that great leaders are persuadable. They can change their mind after they receive new information. And I think this goes along the same vein as the growth mindset. They receive new information, they change their course of action. It's seen as a weakness. Why do we perceive people that change their mind as being weak? Like, didn't they know? Aren't they firm on what they believe? Well, no, they have new information. Right. They're going to make a better decision based on that better information. And we need to be, as a society, be more willing to embrace that. But I think, there's a lot of people with a fixed mindset in a lot of areas, and we are unforgiving to ourselves and to those around us.
I really appreciate what you just said, because not only did you tie it to the very first thing you said in the program, which is what on earth is going on with this book, or according to this book, and you said that people are there's this growth mindset that is becoming more and more prevalent in our society. And yet what you just said is so interesting, because that it's becoming more prevalent in some sectors, such as technology and innovation in Silicon Valley. But in other sectors, such as politics, it seems to be becoming less prevalent.
Yeah.
And that the fixed mindset in politics, and obviously the show is often a highly political show. We talk a lot about politics and about our expectations of political leaders and political systems, but we're very unforgiving. We're very unforgiving of failure and making mistakes. It seems that we want a sterile human being to be a politician. I don't think we want that as individuals. I think we want nuance, and I think we want complexity in our leaders. But I think as a group, as a society, we seem to cut off all of the edges. We want someone that we as a group need someone that appeals to everybody. Because if one section of us doesn't like someone because they failed in the past, then we will tear them apart. And then because they're being torn apart by one section of the group, then the entire group, I guess, renders them incapable of leadership. And there's this real crisis of leadership in political circles. And I think Silicon Valley types think that they have the answer. Mark Zuckerberg seems to be thinking about running for president one day, soon or later. I mean, people see that as a joke, but I think that in Silicon Valley, people are thinking, well, why not?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, not necessarily Mark Zuckerberg, but why not have somebody who has a growth mindset, who is willing to fail and willing to try things differently. And one other thing that I wanted to bring up was you talk about these companies that have done this great work but aren't allowed to fail, even though in a social sense, but in their innovation, they fail all the time. If you go and look online at the Wayback Machine at certain websites, you can see what Google looked like 10 years ago, or what IBM's website looked like 7 years ago. It's fascinating because if you were to take IBM's website from 7 years ago, or the New York Times website from 12 years ago, it would be an absolute failure today. It would truly be the failing New York Times, as Donald Trump calls it. And yet that was part of the growth. And we would forgive that in innovation, but we don't seem to forgive that in our politics. That was a long speech. We're at the end of the show now, Mark. But my last question to you is, what have we missed here? What's the one thing that we haven't talked about that we should have?
I just want to speak about one other book, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maltz. He describes a missile, and when the missile launches, the missile's heading towards a target, and there's a series of relays back and forth between the missile and the target, and there's constant feedback. And when that feedback makes it back to the missile makes an adjustment to get back on course. So the missile, in its trajectory, makes a series of adjustments all the way to hit the target. I don't condone warfare at all, but the analogy is that to succeed, you need to make a series of adjustments, and you need feedback. And so as you're flying through the air to your success, there is going to be thousands of little adjustments that need to be made to get there. And the fixed mindset cannot get you there. You'll launch the missile and walk away. But with a growth mindset, you realize that to get where you want to be, there's a series of adjustments that need to be made, and those adjustments are only made possible, or knowledge of those needed adjustments are made possible through feedback.
Well, and I think that you could apply that you could take that metaphor and extend it to the design and evolution of rockets. That, when a rocket lifts off and then blows up on the launch pad, because we're just starting this thing, it's going to happen. You're going to have accidents, and then it's not going to hit its target. So Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, they've become proficient at sending a rocket up into space, deploying a satellite, coming back down and landing the bottom half of the rocket on a floating platform in the ocean, which is moving with the waves of the ocean, and landing it safely and then reusing that rocket. But many, many times, those rockets have missed the platform, blown up, fallen into the ocean. So it's not. So the feedback that we're getting, because they have data coming back from the rocket as it goes up into space, the feedback that they get is crucial for the next time they launch the rocket. And in fact, you could not succeed. Elon Musk could never have built SpaceX without all of those failures leading up, and all of that growth leading up to the success that it now has achieved. And truly, SpaceX is a paragon of success in the technology and space industry. It has dominated commercial spaceflight. But anyways, that's a talk for another program. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It was fantastic.
For more information about the show, or for links to social media, or to get in touch, go to www.wogoshow.com. That's WOEGO show.com. Your quote of the week is inspired by all of this talk about effort and work, and the fact that the only way to get better is to change your mindset, and the only way to change your mindset is to work at it. So this quote is from Michael Crichton. It goes, "Working inspires inspiration. Keep working. If you succeed, keep working. If you fail, keep working. If you're interested, keep working. If you're bored, keep working." Thanks for listening. Hey, just a quick note to let you know that this show was originally broadcast on CFRC 101.9 FM in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, and that you can also catch it every Tuesday on CHMR in St. John's, Newfoundland. Thanks again.